The black car pulled up to the old brick building on a cold October evening in 2084. Keanu Reeves stepped out slowly, his 80-year-old body moving carefully but still strong. The streetlights cast long shadows across the empty parking lot of Lincoln Preparatory Academy. The school looked smaller than he remembered from his teenage years. "You sure you want to go in there tonight, sir?" asked his driver, a young man named Pete who had been working for him for 3 years.
It's
"Pretty late and the building looks dark." Keanu pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders. The October wind was sharp, cutting through the fabric like a knife. "I need to see it the way it was when I was here. Night. When everything was quiet. It's when I did my best thinking back then." Pete nodded and handed him a flashlight. "I'll wait here. Just call if you need anything." Keanu walked toward the main entrance, his footsteps echoing off the concrete. The documentary crew had filmed here earlier that day, asking him questions about his childhood, his struggles with reading, and how this place had shaped him. But something had felt incomplete about those daylight interviews. Lived in the shadows, the quiet moments between classes when he had wandered these halls feeling lost and different. The front doors were locked, but Keanu had expected that. He walked around to the side entrance, the one near the gymnasium. His fingers remembered the path even after 60 years. This door had always been left open late at night for the cleaning crew. Some things never changed. The door opened with a soft click. Keanu stepped inside and immediately smelled the familiar. A mixture of floor wax and old books that had defined his teenage years. The hallway stretched out before him, lined with green lockers that had been painted and repainted dozens of times. Over the decades, his footsteps echoed in the empty space. He moved slowly down the main corridor, his flashlight beam dancing across the walls. There was his old English classroom where Mrs. Peterson had been so patient with his reading difficulties. There was the cafeteria where he had eaten lunch alone most days. He was too shy to join the other kids at their tables. A sound made him stop. It was faint, but rhythmic, coming from somewhere deeper in the building. The soft swish of a mop against the floor, the gentle splash of water in a bucket. Someone was here, working in the darkness. Keanu followed the sound down the hall, toward the science wing. The noise grew louder as he walked. Through an open classroom door, he could see a warm yellow light spilling into the hallway. The sound of humming drifted out, an old tune that seemed familiar but distant. He approached the doorway carefully and peered inside. An elderly man was mopping the floor with slow, steady movements. He was tall, but bent with age, wearing dark blue work clothes and rubber gloves. His gray hair was thin on top, and his face was weathered with deep lines around his eyes. There was something about the way he moved, something about the careful attention he paid to each corner of the room that made Keanu's heart skip. "Frank." Keanu called out softly. The old man looked up, his dark eyes meeting Keanu's. For a moment, neither of them moved, and a slow smile spread across Frank's face, the same gentle smile that had greeted a confused teenage boy so many years ago. "Well, I'll be damned," Frank said, leaning on his mop handle. "Keanu Reeves, though I suppose everyone knows that name now." His voice was gravelly with age, but still warm, still kind. Keanu stepped into the classroom, his flashlight forgotten. In his hand. "Frank Martinez. You're still here." "Still here," Frank agreed, chuckling softly, "though I guess still isn't quite right. I retired about 15 years ago, but they called me back when the new cleaning company couldn't keep up with the job. Seems like young folks these days don't have the patience for this kind of work." "How old are you now, Frank?" Frank paused as if calculating something difficult. 102 last month? "Though I don't feel a day over 90. I laughed at his own joke, the sound echoing in the empty classroom. Keanu stared at him. In amazement, Frank looked old, certainly, but not like any 100-year-old man he had ever seen. His eyes were bright and alert, his movements steady, despite his age. Most people half his age would struggle with the physical demands of janitorial work. "I can't believe you're still working at your age. Don't you have family? Retirement savings?" Frank's smile faded slightly. "Had a wife, but she passed 12. Years ago, kids are grown and scattered across the country with their own problems. As for savings, ... double quotes." He shrugged. "The pension from the school district isn't much, and I've got medical bills. You know how it is. But I don't mind the work. Keeps me busy. Keeps me useful. Keanu felt a familiar tightness in his chest. The same feeling he had gotten as a teenager when he saw injustice or unfairness. Frank, you helped me so much when I was here. Do you remember? You used to let me practice my lines in the auditorium after hours. You'd stay late just so I could have a quiet place to work on my reading. Of course I remember, Frank said, his eyes twinkling. You were struggling with those words, but you had something special. I could see it even then. You just needed someone to believe in you, to give you the time and space to find your own way. You were the only adult who did that. Everyone else wanted to fix me, or change me, or give up on me. But you just let me be myself, and helped me get better. At it? Frank nodded slowly. That's what janitors do, you know? Clean up messes, but we also see things other people miss. We're here when the building is quiet and people think nobody's watching. That's when you see who people really are. The two men stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the years falling away between them. Keanu could almost see his teenage self, awkward and uncertain, finding refuge in Frank's quiet presence. I became successful because of people like you, Keanu said finally. And here you are, still working at over 100 years old, because the world didn't take care of you the way it should have. Frank waved a dismissive hand. Don't you worry about me, son. I'm doing fine. I've got my health. I've got my work. And now I've got a visit from a famous movie star. It's more than most folks my age can say. But Keanu was already thinking, his mind racing with possibilities. Frank Martinez had given him something precious all those years ago. Now it was time to return the favor? 3 weeks later, Keanu sat in his Los Angeles office, staring at a stack of documents spread across his desk. He had hired a private investigator named Dan Cooper to look into Frank Martinez's background. What he had found made no sense at all. According to the files, Frank had been born in 1982, which would make him 102 years old, as he had claimed. But the medical records Dan had managed to obtain told a different story. Frank's last physical exam showed the heart rate and blood pressure of a man in his 50s. His bone density was better than most 40-year-olds. Unusual vitals and recommend further testing, but nothing had been followed up. There's something else, Dan said, sliding another folder across the desk. I found employment records going back to 1962. Frank Martinez has been working at Lincoln Preparatory Academy for 62 years without a single sick day. Not one. Keanu picked up the folder and flipped through the pages. Timesheets, performance reviews, and employee photos spanning decades. In the earliest photos, Frank looked like a man in his 20s. In the most recent ones, he looked like a man in his 70s. The aging process seemed to have slowed down dramatically somewhere in the middle. This is impossible, Keanu muttered. It gets stranger, Don continued. I tried to find records of his family, his background before 1962. Nothing. Frank Martinez appears in the system that year like he was born from thin air. No birth certificate, no school records, no family history. Just a social security number. And a job application. Keanu leaned back in his chair. What about his medical history? Hospital records. That's where it gets really weird. I found a connection to something called Project Long Life. It was a government program that ran from 1961 to 1967. Highly classified. Most of the records are still sealed, but I found some references in budget documents and personnel files. Dan pulled out another set of papers. The project was supposedly about extending human lifespan. It recruited volunteers from low-income neighborhoods, people who needed money and wouldn't be missed if something went wrong. The volunteers were promised good pay and medical care for their families in exchange for participating in experimental treatments. Where the trail goes cold. But here's the interesting part. The project was shut down suddenly in 1967 after some kind of incident. Obvious. All the records were classified. All the personnel reassigned or retired. But there are references to successful subjects who were given new identities and placed in civilian jobs. Keanu felt a chill run down his spine. You think Frank was one of these subjects? I think Frank Martinez didn't exist before 1962. I think he was someone else. someone who volunteered for this program and was given a new identity when it ended. That evening, Keanu drove back to Toronto. He needed to talk to Frank, but he wasn't sure how to approach the subject. How do you ask someone if they're part of a government conspiracy? How do you tell them you've been investigating their past? He found Frank in the school cafeteria, wiping down tables with the same careful attention he gave everything else. The old man looked up and smiled when he saw Keanu approaching. Back again so soon? I thought you movie stars were too busy for us regular folks. Frank, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Frank's smile faded slightly. He set down his cloth and leaned against the table. Sounds serious. How long have you really been alive? The question hung in the air between them. Frank's face went through several expressions: surprise, fear, sadness, and finally resignation. That's a hell of a thing to ask an old man, Frank said quietly. I hired someone to look into your background. The records don't make sense. You've been working here for over 60 years without aging normally. Your medical records show impossible readings for someone your age. There's no trace of you existing before 1962. Frank was quiet for a long time. He walked over to one of the cafeteria windows and stared out at the dark playground. I wondered when someone would start asking questions. 60 years is a long time to keep a secret. What happened to you, Frank? Frank turned around, his eyes looking older than his face. I wasn't always Frank Martinez. Back in 1961, I was Antonio Reyes. I was 22 years old, married to a beautiful woman named Maria, and we had 3 little kids. I was working construction, but the pay was terrible. We were living in a tiny apartment in the worst part of Chicago. He sat down heavily in one of the plastic chairs. One day, some government men came around the neighborhood. They were looking for volunteers for a medical study. They promised good money, enough to move my family to a better place. All I had to do was spend 6 months in a facility upstate and let them run some tests. What kind of tests? They told us it was about making people live longer, stay healthier. At first, it seemed like a good deal. The facility was clean, the food was good, and they paid my family every month like they promised. But then they started the real treatments. Frank's voice grew distant, as if he were seeing events from long ago. They would take us into a room with machines I'd never seen before, strange devices that hummed and glowed with lights that hurt to look at. They would inject us with things that made us feel like we were burning from the inside. Most of the other volunteers got sick. Some of them died, but you didn't. No, I didn't. Whatever they were doing to us, my body accepted it. I got stronger instead of weaker. My vision improved. I could hear things other people couldn't. I could go days without sleep and still feel fine. They were excited about me. They said I was one of their successes. Keanu sat down across from him. What were they really doing to you? Frank looked directly at him, his eyes serious. They never told us the whole truth, but I figured it out eventually. The technology they were using wasn't human. It was something they had found, something from somewhere else. They were trying to change us, make us into something more than human. From somewhere else, you mean? I mean from the stars, son. They had found pieces of a ship that crashed in the desert years before. Inside that ship were things that could change human biology. They were trying to create people who could live longer, think faster, survive things that would kill normal humans. Keanu felt his world shifting. Aliens. That's what I believe. The technology was too advanced, too different from anything humans had invented, and it worked, at least on some of us. But the program was shut down when people started asking questions. Too many volunteers had died. Too many families were asking where their loved ones had gone. What happened to you when it ended? Frank's expression grew sad. They gave me a choice. I could stay with the government and work for them, be their test subject for the rest of my life, or I could take a new identity and disappear into society. They would support me with a job and a small income, but I could never contact my family again. Never let anyone know what had happened to me. He chose to disappear. I chose to live. Maria and the kids thought I had died in an accident at the facility. They held a funeral for Antonio Reyes. Frank Martinez was born that same day, given a job as a janitor at a school in Canada, far away from everyone who had known me before. Keanu felt a weight settling in his chest. "You've been alone all this time. I've been free," Frank corrected. "Free to live a simple life. Free to help kids like you who needed someone to believe in them. The treatments made me different, but they didn't make me less human. I chose to use whatever time I had left to do something good." "How much time do you have left?" Frank smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I don't know. Changes in my body seem to be slowing down my aging, but they're not stopping it. I might live another 50 years, or I might die tomorrow. And nobody knows what happens to people like me in the long run." The two men sat in silence, the weight of Frank's story settling between them. Outside, the wind rattled the windows of the empty school. "There's something else," Frank said finally. "I'm not the only one. There were 12 of us who survived. The treatments. We're all given new identities, scattered across the country. I don't know where the others are now, but I know they're out there somewhere, living quiet lives just like me." Keanu looked at this man who had helped him so long ago, who had carried such an incredible secret for over 60 years. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I'm tired of being alone with it, and because I think something is happening. Strange things in the sky, reports of unusual activity at government facilities. I think the people who changed us might be coming back." Keanu couldn't sleep for 3 days after his conversation with Frank. He kept thinking about alien technology, government conspiracies, and 12 enhanced humans scattered across the country. Finally, he decided he needed more answers. He called. His assistant Lisa N told her to clear his schedule for the next month. Then he flew back to Toronto and rented a small apartment near the school. If Frank was right about strange things happening, Keanu wanted to be close by, every evening. He would visit Frank at the school. They would sit in the empty cafeteria and talk about the past. But Keanu was really watching for signs of whatever Frank thought was coming. On the 4th night, Frank seemed more nervous than usual. He kept looking out the windows and checking. "His watch, what's wrong?" Keanu asked. "Been having dreams," Frank said quietly. "Strange dreams about the facility where they changed me. But also dreams about places I've never been. Cities made of light, ships traveling between stars, beings that look almost human, but not quite. You think the dreams mean something?" "I think they're trying to contact me. All of us who were changed, I think they're coming back." That night, Keanu was walking back to his apartment when he saw lights in the sky. Not airplane lights or helicopter lights, but something else. 3 bright objects moving in perfect formation, silent and fast. They disappeared behind the clouds. Before he could get a good look at them, the next morning he called Dan Cooper, his private investigator. "I need you to look into something else," Keanu said. "I want to know everything about Project Long Life. I want to find the other 11 survivors. It's going to be expensive and dangerous," Dan warned. "Those kinds of government secrets don't stay secret by accident. I don't care about the cost, and I'll handle the danger." 2 weeks later, Dan called with disturbing news. "I found something. Project Long Life wasn't just about extending human life. It was about creating ambassadors." "Ambassadors? To who?" "According to the documents I found, the government knew about alien contact as early as 1959. A ship had crashed in Nevada. And inside they found beings that looked human, but lived much longer and had different abilities. The aliens weren't dead. They were in some kind of hibernation." Keanu felt his heart racing. "What happened to them?" "They woke up after a few months. They could speak English, which surprised everyone. They said they had been watching Earth for a long time, learning our languages and cultures. They wanted to make contact, but they were worried about how humans would react, so they agreed to the experiments." "Not exactly," aliens offered. "To share their technology with humanity, but only if we could prove we were ready for it. They suggested creating human-alien hybrids who could serve as bridges between our species. People who could understand both worlds. The 12 survivors, right? But something went wrong. The aliens became concerned about how the human government was handling the program. They saw that the military wanted to use the technology for weapons, not for peaceful contact. So they left. They just left. They took their ship and disappeared. But before they went, they placed some kind of monitoring system around Earth. They said they would come back when humanity was ready to join the galactic community. The 12 enhanced humans were supposed to be proof that we could evolve beyond our violent nature. Keanu walked to the window of his apartment and stared out at the city. Where are the other 11 now? That's the really interesting part. I found most of them. They're all doing jobs that help other people. There's a woman named Betty Collins who's been working as a nurse in refugee camps for 40 years. A man called Carlos Rivera who's been teaching children in poor neighborhoods. Another one, Paul Henderson, has been working with homeless people in Seattle. They're all trying to make the world better. It looks that way, like they understood their purpose, even if the government didn't. That evening, Keanu shared Dan's findings with Frank. The old janitor listened carefully, nodding occasionally. That explains the dreams, Frank said. I keep seeing the same faces. People I think I should know but don't remember meeting. They must be the others. And do you think the aliens are really coming back? I think they never left. I think they've been watching us all along, waiting to see what we would do with the gift they gave us. Over the next few days, strange things began happening around the school. Students reported seeing unusual lights at night. Teachers found their classrooms rearranged in patterns that made no sense. The school's computers started receiving messages in languages nobody recognized. Frank seemed to understand what was happening, but he wouldn't explain it to Keanu. It's not time yet, was all he would say. Then one night, in late November, everything changed. Keanu was sitting in the cafeteria with Frank when the lights went out. But instead of darkness, the room filled with a soft blue glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. They're here, Frank whispered. 3 figures appeared in the room, but they didn't walk in through the doors. They simply materialized, like they had been there all along, but invisible. They looked human at first glance, but their eyes were larger and brighter than normal human eyes. Their skin had a slight shimmer to it, like it was made of light. One of them stepped forward and spoke in perfect English. Frank Martinez, you have waited a long time. I have, Frank replied, but I kept my promise. I stayed true to what you taught us. The alien turned to look at Keanu. You brought a friend, someone who cares about you. Keanu found his voice. Who are you? What do you want? We are the Kalen, the alien said. We have been watching your species for many cycles. We gave your people a gift 60 years ago, hoping to help you grow beyond your violent nature. We created bridges between our peoples, but your leaders chose war over peace, so you left. We withdrew our direct contact, but we never stopped watching. We placed monitoring systems around your world to see if humanity could learn to value compassion over conquest. The 12 enhanced humans were our test subjects, but not in the way your government believed. Frank stood up slowly. We were never meant to be weapons or ambassadors to other humans. We were meant to be examples of what humanity could become. Correct. Another alien said, each of you was placed in a situation where you could choose service or selfishness. You chose service. You spent your extended lives helping others, asking for nothing in return. This is what we hope to see. What about the others? Keanu asked. All 12 have remained true to their purpose, the first alien replied. Betty Collins has saved thousands of lives in refugee camps. Carlos Rivera has educated children who would have been forgotten. Paul Henderson has given hope to the hopeless. Each one chose to use their gifts for others. The alien looked directly at Keanu, but you, Keanu Reeves, you are not enhanced. You're fully human, yet you returned to find your old friend. You chose to investigate his story not for fame or profit, but because you cared about someone who had helped you long ago. I don't understand. This is exactly what we have been waiting to see. Humans who remember kindness. Humans who value loyalty over success. Humans who look out for those who are forgotten. Frank smiled. They're not here to make contact with governments or military leaders. They're here because of what we represent. All of us, enhanced and normal humans alike. Third alien nodded. Your species has been under evaluation for 60 years. We have watched your wars, your greed, your destruction of your own planet. But we have also watched the 12 enhanced ones, and humans like you, Keanu Reeves. We have seen that humanity is capable of growth. What happens now? Keanu asked. Now. The first alien said, we make formal contact, not with your governments, but with your people. We begin by showing them what you have shown us. That the greatest strength of humanity is not in your weapons or your technology, but in your capacity to care for one another. The blue light began to fade, and the aliens started to become transparent again. Wait, Keanu called out. You need from us? Continue doing what you have been doing, the alien replied. Frank will continue his work, but now with our full support. And you, Keanu Reeves, will help us show your world that first contact comes not through conquest, but through compassion. The aliens vanished, leaving Keanu and Frank alone in the dark cafeteria. But somehow, everything had changed. The morning after the aliens visited, Frank looked different. He still appeared to be an old man, but there was something new in his eyes, a brightness that hadn't been there before. When he moved, he seemed lighter, more graceful. Feel? Keanu asked as they sat in the school cafeteria. It's like I've been carrying a heavy weight for 60 years and someone just lifted it off my shoulders, Frank replied. They gave me something last night. Not just knowledge, but purpose. Real purpose. What kind of knowledge? Frank held up his hand, and for a moment his skin glowed with the same soft blue light they had seen the night before. I can communicate. With them now, and through them, I can reach the others. Betty, Carlos, Paul, all of them. We're connected now in a way we never were before. Keanu stared at Frank's glowing hand until the light faded. What do they want you to do? They want us to prepare humanity for what's coming. First contact isn't going to be announced on television or at the United Nations. It's going to happen person by person, community by community, and it starts with us. Over the next few weeks, Keanu watched as Frank began to change not just physically, but in his approach to his work. The old janitor started talking to students differently, offering guidance that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than normal human wisdom. Kids who had been struggling in school suddenly found new motivation. Teachers noticed that their classrooms felt more peaceful when Frank had cleaned them. But Keanu knew they needed to do more than just influence one school. If the aliens were serious about humanity joining some kind of galactic community, they would need to reach many more people. I have an idea, Keanu told Frank one evening, but you're not going to like it. Try me. I want to use my money and influence to find the other enhanced humans and bring them together. Create a foundation that looks like charity work, but is really about preparing people for first contact. Frank frowned. That sounds dangerous. The government finds out what we're really doing. Or the government had their chance 60 years ago, and they blew it. This is bigger than politics now. This is about the future of our entire species. What kind of foundation? Keanu had been thinking about this for days. We'll call it the Martinez Foundation, named after you. Officially, it will be about helping forgotten people, the ones society overlooks. Janitors, nurses, teachers, homeless. People. We'll provide funding for community programs, education, disaster relief. And unofficially, we'll be identifying and training the people who can help humanity take its next step. The aliens said they've been watching us. They must know which humans are ready for contact and which ones aren't. Frank was quiet for a long time. You're talking about spending millions of dollars. I'm talking about spending whatever it takes. I've made more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. What good is it if I don't use it for something important? Do you think the other enhanced ones will agree to this? I think they've been waiting for this moment just like you have. You just didn't know it yet. It's the first person they found. Was Betty Collins. Don Cooper had tracked her to a refugee camp on the border between Greece and Turkey, where she had been working as a nurse for the past 15 years. When Keanu and Frank arrived at the camp, they found her treating children who had been injured during their escape from war zones. Betty was a small woman with gray hair and gentle eyes. But when she saw Frank, something changed in her expression. Recognition, but also relief. I've been having the dreams too, she said before Frank could even introduce himself. Dreams about blue light and voices speaking in languages I don't understand, but somehow I do understand them. The Kalen are calling us together, Frank explained. All 12 of us. It's time. Time for what? Keanu stepped forward. Time to help our species grow up. They explained the foundation idea to Betty and she agreed immediately. I've been working in these camps for decades, watching humans at their worst and their best. People who have lost everything but still share their last piece of bread with strangers. If those people can learn to accept beings from other worlds, anyone can. The next enhanced human they found was Carlos Rivera in Detroit. He had been teaching at an inner-city school for 35 years, using his own money to buy supplies and staying late every day to tutor struggling students. When Frank and Keanu walked into his classroom, Carlos looked up from grading papers and smiled. "Frank Martinez," he said. "I was wondering when you'd find me." Carlos had been having the dreams too, but he had also been experiencing something else. His students had started performing better on tests, not because they were studying harder, but because they seemed to understand concepts that had previously been impossible for them. "I think the Kalen are working through us," Carlos told them. "It's helping us help others in ways we never could before." "Are you willing to be part of something bigger?" Keanu asked. "I've been part of something bigger my whole life," Carlos replied. "I just didn't know what it was called." One by one, they found the others. Paul Henderson, who had been working with homeless people in Seattle. Maria Santos, who had been running a food bank in Phoenix. Robert Kim, who had been volunteering at hospitals in Chicago. Each one had been having the dreams. Each one had noticed changes in their abilities. Each one was ready to join the foundation. The most difficult to find was Jack Murphy, who had been working as a firefighter in New York for 40 years. When they finally tracked him down, he was reluctant to talk. "I know what you people want," he said, when they met at a coffee shop near his firehouse. "You want to drag me into some kind of conspiracy? Well, I've got news for you. Guess. I don't do conspiracies." "This isn't a conspiracy," Frank said patiently. "This is about service. It's about using the gifts we were given to help others. I've been helping others my whole life. I don't need some foundation to tell me how to do my job." Keanu leaned forward. "Jack, how many fires have you walked into that should have killed you? How many people have you rescued from situations that were impossible to survive?" Jack's expression grew wary. "What are you getting at?" "You know you're different. You know you can do things other people can't do. The question is, are you going to keep pretending that's normal? Or are you going to help us use these abilities for something bigger?" It took 3 more meetings. But eventually Jack agreed to join them. "Not because I believe in aliens or any of that science fiction stuff," he insisted, "but because I believe in helping people." Within 6 months, the Martinez Foundation was operational. They had offices in 12 cities, each one run by one of the enhanced humans. On the surface, they were providing funding for community programs, disaster relief, and education initiatives. But underneath, they were doing something much more important. They were identifying humans who were ready for the truth about their place in the universe. People who showed compassion over greed, service over selfishness, cooperation over competition. These people were invited to special programs that looked like leadership training, but were actually in preparation for first contact. The aliens had given them a way to recognize these special humans. When someone was ready, the enhanced ones could see a faint glow around them, visible only to those who had been changed by Kalen technology. "We're not trying to change everyone," Frank explained to Keanu as they watched a group of teachers participating in one of their programs. "We're finding the ones who are already changing themselves. The ones who understand that humanity's future depends on how we treat each other. How many do we need? The Kalen haven't told us exactly, but I think we'll know when we have enough. When there are enough humans ready for contact, they'll make their move. And then what?" Frank smiled. "Then we find out if humanity is really ready to join the galactic community, or if we still have more growing up to do." 2 years after the Martinez Foundation began its work, strange reports started appearing in the news. Pilots saw unexplained lights in the sky. Sailors noticed objects moving underwater faster than any known technology could travel. Radio telescopes picked up signals that seemed to be trying to communicate, but in patterns no human could understand. The government tried to keep these reports quiet, and social media made that impossible. Videos of unusual phenomena appeared online every day. Some were fake, but others showed things that couldn't be explained by known science. Frank had been expecting this. "They're getting ready to reveal themselves," he told Keanu during one of their evening meetings at the school. "The Kalen are testing how humans react to the unknown." "How are we doing?" "Better than expected. The people we've been working with, through the foundation, are spreading the message without even knowing it. They're teaching others to be less afraid, more accepting of differences. The Martinez Foundation now had programs in 43 cities across North America. Each program was led by one of the enhanced humans or by regular humans who had shown they were ready for larger truths. They ran community gardens, where people of different backgrounds worked together. They organized disaster response teams that helped anyone in need, regardless of race or religion. They created education programs that taught children to think about humanity as part of something bigger. But the real test came on a cold February morning when everything changed. Keanu was in Toronto, visiting Frank at the school as he did every few weeks. They were sitting in the cafeteria, discussing plans for expanding their programs into South America, when Frank suddenly went very still. "They're coming," he whispered. "Who's coming?" "Oh, the Kalen. This isn't just a visit. This is first contact. Real first contact." Outside, people were starting to gather in the streets. They were pointing at the sky, some taking pictures with their phones, others just standing and staring. Keanu looked out the window and saw what they were looking at. Ships, dozens of them, hanging in the air above the city like they weighed nothing. They were beautiful, made of what looked like crystal and light. They didn't make any noise, didn't disturb the air around them. They just hung there waiting. "Why here?" Keanu asked. "Why Toronto? Why not Washington or New York or London?" Frank smiled, because this is where it all started. This is where a young man struggling with reading met a janitor who believed in him. This is where human compassion and alien wisdom first came together in a way that mattered. The ships began to descend slowly, instead of landing in the middle of the city or at the airport. They came down in parks, in school playgrounds, in places where children played. The largest ship settled gently onto the football field behind Lincoln Preparatory Academy. "They're not trying to intimidate anyone," Frank observed. "They're showing that they come in peace by choosing places associated with learning and growth." People were gathering around the ships, but there was no panic. The years of subtle preparation through the foundation had worked instead of fear. Most people showed curiosity. Instead of running away, they moved closer, wanting to understand. The door of the ship on the school field opened, and 3 Kalens stepped out. They looked exactly as they had during their secret meeting with Frank and Keanu 2 years earlier. Tall, graceful, with large bright eyes, and skin that seemed to glow with inner light. But this time they weren't alone. With them came Frank's 11 companions, the other enhanced humans. Betty Collins stepped out beside one of the aliens, looking more confident than Keanu had ever seen her. Carlos Rivera emerged from another part of the ship, his hand glowing with the same blue light that Frank sometimes displayed. "They've been preparing to," Frank said. "The Kalen have been working with all of us, getting us ready for this moment." A crowd had gathered around the ship, but they maintained a respectful distance. Children seemed less afraid than adults, approaching the edge of the circle with wonder in their eyes. One of the Kalens stepped forward and spoke in a voice that somehow reached everyone in the area. Even though it wasn't particularly loud, "People of Earth," the alien said, "we are the Kalen. We have been watching your world for many of your lifetimes. Today we make formal contact because we have seen that your species is ready to join the larger community of worlds." "Why didn't?" And the crowd shouted, "How do we know you come in peace?" The alien gestured to Frank and the other enhanced humans. "Because we have been working with members of your own species for 60 years. These humans have shown us that your people are capable of great compassion, great wisdom, and great growth." Frank stepped forward, and suddenly his normal janitor's uniform was replaced by clothing that seemed to be made of the same crystal-like material as the ships. He looked the same, but somehow more than he had been. "I am Frank Martinez," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the crowd. "I have been working as a janitor at this school for over 60 years. I have watched thousands of children grow up, helped them learn, and tried to show them kindness. The Kalen chose people like me not because we were special, but because we understood that service to others is the highest calling." Betty Collins stepped forward as well. "I am Betty Collins. I've spent my life caring for refugees, for people who had nowhere else to turn. The Kalen taught me that helping strangers is the same as helping family. One by one, each of the enhanced humans introduced themselves and told their stories. Carlos spoke about teaching children who everyone else had given up on. Paul talked about providing shelter for the homeless. Maria described feeding hungry families for decades. These are your ambassadors to the stars, the lead, Kalen said. Not politicians or military leaders, but teachers and nurses and janitors and firefighters. People who chose service over success, compassion over conquest. A woman in the crowd raised her hand. What do you want from us? We want to offer you membership in the Galactic Council, the Kalen replied. A community of over 300 worlds that work together for the benefit of all sentient life. But membership comes with responsibilities. What kind of responsibilities? You must prove that you can work together as a species. You must show that you can solve problems without violence. You must demonstrate that you value the welfare of others as much as your own success. And if we can't, the alien's expression grew sad, then you will remain isolated until you can. We will not abandon you, but we cannot allow a violent species to threaten the peace that exists among the stars. Keanu stepped forward. How long do we have to prove ourselves? The testing has already begun, the Kalen said. Every act of kindness, every moment of cooperation, every choice to help rather than harm is being observed. Not by us, but by your own actions and their consequences. Frank looked at Keanu and smiled. This is what we've been preparing for. Not just first contact, but first responsibility. The chance to show that humans can be trusted with the knowledge that we're not alone in the universe. The ships remained over the city for 3 days. During that time, people came from all over the world to see them, to talk to the enhanced humans, to ask questions about what it meant to be part of a galactic community. The Kalen answered questions patiently, but they made it clear that Earth's membership in the Galactic Council wasn't automatic. It would have to be earned through the actions of every human on the planet. When the ships finally prepared to leave, the lead Kalen made one final announcement. We will return in 1 year. During that time, we will be watching to see how your species responds to the knowledge of our existence. If you can work together, if you can solve your conflicts peacefully, if you can show that you truly understand what it means to be part of something larger than yourselves, then we will welcome you as full members of the galactic community. And if we can't, someone called out. Then we will wait, the alien replied. We have waited this long. We can wait longer. What? But we hope that will not be necessary. As the ships rose into the sky and disappeared among the stars, Frank put his hand on Keanu's shoulder. Now the real work begins, he said. 1 year later, the world had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The first few weeks after first contact had been chaotic. Some governments tried to claim control over the situation. Some religious leaders declared the aliens were either angels or demons. Some people panicked and tried to prepare for war, but something unexpected happened. The enhanced humans became the voices that people listened to. Frank Martinez, the janitor from Toronto, found himself speaking to crowds of thousands. Betty Collins appeared on television programs around the world, explaining what the Kalen really wanted from humanity. Carlos Rivera's simple wisdom about treating others with kindness became the most watched video in internet history. People trust us, Frank told Keanu, as they walked through the streets of Toronto 6 months after first contact. Not because we're special, but because we're ordinary. We're the people they see every day doing jobs that matter. The Martinez Foundation had grown into something much larger than anyone had imagined. Local branches operated in over 200 cities across 6 continents. But they weren't controlled by any government or corporation. They remained true to their original purpose, finding and supporting people who chose service over selfishness. The changes started small. Community gardens appeared in abandoned lots. Neighborhood watch groups focused on helping rather than policing. Schools began teaching cooperation alongside competition. Disaster response became faster and more effective as people worked together. Without waiting for official orders, wars didn't stop immediately, but they became harder to start and easier to end. When soldiers on opposite sides realized they were fighting over resources that could be shared, many conflicts simply dissolved. The enhanced humans traveled to war zones, not as negotiators, but as examples of what humans could be when they chose to help rather than harm. The Kalen aren't making us change, Frank observed. They're just showing us what we're capable of when we stop being afraid of each other. Keanu had become something he never expected. A student. At 81 years old, he spent his days learning from Frank and the other enhanced humans about what it really meant to serve others. His wealth became a tool for transformation rather than just comfort. I used to think success meant being remembered, he told Frank one evening as they sat in the school cafeteria. Now I think it means helping others succeed. You're finally understanding what I tried to teach you 60 years ago, Frank replied with a smile. The most important role you can play is being someone who lifts others up. As the year progressed, reports came in from around the world. Crime rates were dropping in cities where the foundation operated. Educational achievement was rising in schools that taught cooperation. Environmental cleanup projects were succeeding in places where communities worked together, but the real test came during the winter. When a massive earthquake struck a poor region of Central America, traditional disaster response would have taken weeks to organize and months to implement. Instead, something remarkable happened. The enhanced humans coordinated a response that brought together people from dozens of countries. Volunteers arrived within hours, not days. Supplies were distributed efficiently because communities organized themselves. Refugee camps became temporary cities where people from different nations worked side by side. This is what the Kalen wanted to see, Frank said as he and Keanu surveyed the relief efforts. Not just that we can help our own people, but that we can help anyone who needs it. The final test came on the anniversary of first contact. The ships returned as promised, settling once again on the football field behind Lincoln Preparatory Academy. But this time, thousands of people gathered to welcome them. There was no fear, no panic, just curiosity and hope. The lead Kalen emerged from the ship and walked directly to Frank, who was waiting in his simple janitor's uniform. Frank Martinez, the alien said. Earth's first ambassador to the stars. You have done well. We all have, Frank replied. Humans are ready. Are they? Tell us what has changed. Frank gestured to the crowd around them. Look at them. A year ago, they would have been afraid. Now they're excited. They understand that being part of something bigger doesn't make them smaller. It makes them more than they were. The Kalen walked through the crowd, observing, listening to conversations. Children ran up to them without fear, asking questions about other worlds and other species. Adults spoke about their projects to help their communities. Their plans to work with people from other countries after several hours. The aliens gathered together for a private discussion. Then the lead Kalen returned to where Frank and Keanu were waiting. We have made our decision, the alien announced. Humanity has demonstrated the qualities we look for in members of the Galactic Council. You value service over dominance. You choose cooperation over conflict. You understand that strength comes from helping others, not defeating them. Erupted in cheers. But the Kalen raised a hand for silence. However, the alien continued. Membership in the Galactic Council comes with new responsibilities. You will be given access to technologies that could transform your world or destroy it. You will encounter species that are very different from you. You will face challenges that no single world can handle alone. We're ready, Frank said simply. You then prove it one more time. We offer you the position of Earth's primary ambassador to the Galactic Council. You, Frank Martinez, a janitor who chose service over recognition for over 60 years. Frank looked around at the faces surrounding him. Keanu, whose loyalty had started this entire journey. Betty, Carlos, and the other enhanced humans who had dedicated their lives to helping others. The thousands of ordinary people who had chosen to make their communities better. I accept, Frank said. But not just for myself. I accept as a representative of every human who chooses to help rather than harm, to build rather than destroy, to include rather than exclude. The Kalen smiled, an expression that seemed to light up their entire being. Then welcome to the Galactic Council, Ambassador Martinez. Your first assignment is to help other worlds learn what Earth has discovered, that the greatest civilizations are built not by the powerful, but by those who serve. As the ceremony concluded, Frank remained in his janitor's uniform.
Ow.
But now, it was made of the same crystal-like material as the Kalen ships, marking him as an official representative of both Earth and the galactic community. What happens now? Keanu asked. We keep doing what we've always done, Frank replied. We take care of people, clean up messes. We help others learn and grow. The only difference is that now our classroom is the entire galaxy. 3 months. Later, children at Lincoln Preparatory Academy were learning about planets they had never heard of. The hallways that Frank had cleaned for decades now echoed with conversations about interstellar trade and diplomatic missions to distant worlds. But Frank was still there, still mopping floors and fixing broken desks, because he had learned long ago that the most important job in any organization was taking care of the people who needed help. Why do you still do this? A young teacher asked him one day. You're the ambassador to the stars. You could be living in luxury somewhere. Frank smiled and continued cleaning a window, because this is where it all started. This is where a young man named Keanu learned that someone believed in him. This is where I learned that the best way to change the galaxy is to take care of the people right in front of you. In the evening, when the school was quiet, Frank would sometimes stand in the hallway and remember that scared teenage boy who had needed someone to believe in him. Now that boy was 82 years old and had helped humanity take its place. Among the stars, the janitor had become an ambassador. But more importantly, the ambassador remained a janitor. Because Frank Martinez understood what the Kalen had seen in humanity all along, that true greatness comes not from reaching for the stars, but from lifting others up to reach them with you. And throughout the galaxy, other species would learn. To tell the story of Earth, the world that earned its place in the cosmic community not through conquest or technology, but through the simple wisdom of a janitor who chose service over glory and a friend who never forgot to look back and help. Others follow.